The vast emptiness of space stretched before the ISS Resilience, a gleaming vessel that represented humanity's first true step into the galactic unknown. Commander J. Park stood at the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the holographic displays flicker with unknown signals. It had been 3 years since Earth discovered faster-than-light communication. 3 years of preparing, of listening, of waiting. The alien transmission came suddenly, a burst of complex mathematical patterns that danced across the ship's communication arrays. "Translate," Jay commanded softly. Lieutenant Hai Kim worked, her controls, her fingers moving quickly across the quantum interface. The ship's advanced AI struggled, then suddenly words formed. Not words exactly, but concepts. Intention. Judgment. "We see you," the transmission read. Primitive. Unworthy. Jay's lips curved into a slight smile. Humans had heard such words before. On Earth, in boardrooms, in scientific communities. Unworthy was a challenge, not a conclusion. The alien confederation, known as the Galactic Alignment, had been watching Earth for decades. They saw a planet of divided nations, of constant conflict, of technological infancy. What they didn't see was potential. The first physical contact happened unexpectedly. A small reconnaissance ship approached the ISS Resilience. Its design was unlike anything humans had imagined, organic yet mechanical, fluid yet angular. Wu Choi, the lead representative of the Galactic Alignment, personally led the initial reconnaissance. Humans are to be classified, Wu's communication translated, as a potential research specimen. Recommendation, controlled observation, limited interaction. Hai Kim's hands trembled slightly as she translated. She understood the implications. Humans weren't being invited. They were being categorized, like a new species discovered in some remote jungle, waiting to be studied and potentially discarded. Commander Park said nothing. He watched. The alien ship's sensors began scanning the Resilience. Complex energy signatures mapped every inch of the human vessel. They were looking for weaknesses, for vulnerabilities, for proof of their initial assessment. What they found confused them. The human ship's design showed unexpected complexity. Its quantum shielding was primitive, yet ingenious. Its communication systems, though basic, contained algorithmic patterns that suggested rapid learning capabilities. Wu Choi's initial report back to the Galactic Alignment was clinical. Species shows potential adaptive mechanisms. Primary recommendation, controlled environment study. Secondary recommendation, minimal technological transfer. Inside the Resilience, the crew waited. They had been trained for this moment, not just as soldiers or scientists, but as representatives of an entire planet's hopes and dreams. J. Park understood something the aliens did not. Humanity's greatest strength was never in its current capabilities, but in its ability to adapt, to learn, to transform. The alien ship maintained a careful distance, scanning, watching, judging. But something unexpected was happening. With each scan, with each moment of observation, the aliens were also being observed. Hai Kim's research algorithms were collecting data. Seok Han's engineering team was analyzing the alien ship's technical emissions. Humanity was learning. The first encounter was not a moment of submission, but a moment of potential, of a species about to take its first true step into a larger universe. Not as a conquered race, but as an emerging civilization. The alien ship's sensors continued their relentless scan. They saw a vessel, a crew, a potential specimen. What they didn't see was the beginning of a transformation that would change the galaxy forever. 3 galactic cycles passed. What the alignment considered a brief observation period became something entirely unexpected. Humanity's technological progress defied every known predictive model. Chai Kim sat in her research lab, surrounded by holographic displays tracking human technological evolution. Each graph, each data point told a story of impossible acceleration. Where other species took centuries to develop quantum communication, humans required mere months. The first breakthrough came unexpectedly. A small research team discovered a method to modify human cellular structures rapidly, not through complex genetic engineering, but through a simple protein recalibration technique that shocked xenobiological experts. Seok Han, the lead engineering specialist, demonstrated this capability during a closed galactic alignment conference. Using a basic molecular reconfiguration device, he showed how humans could adapt biological systems faster than any known species. "We don't just learn," Seok explained to bewildered alien scientists. "We transform." The alien researchers watched in stunned silence. What they witnessed contradicted everything in their extensive galactic database. Humans were rewriting biological adaptation rules. Commander J. Park understood this was more than technological progress. This was a fundamental shift in species potential. Where other civilizations saw limitations, humans saw opportunities. The Galactic Alignment's monitoring systems began tracking human developments with increasing nervousness. Each data transmission revealed something unprecedented. Humans were not just learning, they were evolving at an exponential rate. Communication. Technologies developed by human teams reduced interstellar transmission times by 600%. Quantum computing algorithms created by 22-year-old researchers solved problems that had stumped alien civilizations for generations. Wu Choi, the initial alien representative who had first categorized humans as a potential research specimen, began receiving reports that challenged everything he understood about technological development. Human research teams were not just copying existing technologies. They were reimagining them. A communication protocol developed by a small team in Seoul could potentially revolutionize how different species communicated across vast galactic distances. The most surprising element was human unpredictability. Traditional alien scientific approaches followed linear, predictable paths. Human innovation seemed to emerge from chaos, from unexpected connections, from a willingness to challenge existing knowledge. A young researcher named Min Seo developed a neural interface that could translate complex mathematical concepts into intuitive visual representations. This breakthrough meant that complex scientific ideas could now be understood across different species' cognitive frameworks. The Galactic Alignment's research committees began heated debates. Was this rapid progress a threat, an anomaly, or something entirely new? Humans weren't just participating in the galactic scientific community. They were rapidly becoming its most dynamic element. Technological exchanges that were meant to be controlled became opportunities for human teams to demonstrate their unique adaptive capabilities. Where other species saw rules and limitations, humans saw potential pathways. Commander J. Park watched these developments with a calm understanding. He knew what the alien researchers had not yet realized. Humanity's strength was not in its current capabilities, but in its potential to continuously reimagine what was possible. The galaxy was changing, and humans were at the center of this transformation. Wu Choi's initial classification of humans as a research specimen now seemed laughably inadequate. Humans were not just a species to be studied, they were a force that would reshape understanding itself. In research labs, on starships, in communication, centers across human territories, a quiet revolution was happening, not through military might, but through an unprecedented capacity to learn, adapt, and transform. The universe was about to meet a species that didn't just explore boundaries, they redefined them. The Epsilon Quadrant conflict began as a routine, territorial dispute. No one expected it would become the moment that changed everything. 3 alien species had been locked in a centuries-long territorial conflict. Their battle strategies were predictable, their technological capabilities well documented. Massive warships, complex defense systems, generations of military doctrine that seemed unbreakable. Then the humans arrived. Commander J. Park studied the conflict with a detached, almost clinical perspective. Where alien military strategists saw complex battle formations, he saw patterns. Where they saw immovable defense lines, he saw opportunities. The human intervention was unexpected. A small fleet of modified research vessels, equipped with systems that didn't conform to any standard galactic military design. Seok Han had personally modified these ships, transforming research tools into something entirely different. Their first move shocked everyone. Instead of engaging in direct combat, the human fleet began broadcasting complex quantum signals. These weren't weapons. They were communication algorithms designed to disrupt enemy coordination. Alien defense systems, built on generations of established military thinking, began to collapse. Not through physical destruction, but through information manipulation. Communications between enemy fleets became scrambled. Defensive coordinates shifted randomly. Complex battle networks that had taken centuries to develop suddenly became unreliable. Hai Kim, working from the fleet's central command, watched as human strategies unfolded. They weren't fighting the traditional war. They were rewriting how war could be conducted. One alien commander later described it as fighting an opponent who doesn't understand the rules of engagement. But that wasn't accurate. Humans understood the rules perfectly. They just chose to ignore them. Small human teams infiltrated key communication nodes, not through violent boarding actions, but through sophisticated digital interfaces that confused and overwhelmed existing security protocols. The conflict that was supposed to last months concluded in less than 72 hours. No massive casualties, no traditional destruction. Just a complete systemic collapse of established military strategies. Wu Choi, watching from the Galactic Alignment headquarters, realized something fundamental had changed. Humans weren't just another species learning galactic warfare. They were redesigning its entire concept. The human approach was almost philosophical. War wasn't about destruction. It was about disruption. About understanding complex systems and finding their most vulnerable points. Commander Park's report was simplicity itself. Conflict resolved, minimal resource expenditure, 0 human casualties. The Galactic Alignment's military research teams spent months trying to understand what had happened. Their complex analytical systems struggled to decode the human strategy. What they failed to understand was the human capacity for creative problem-solving. Traditional military thinking saw conflict as a linear challenge. Humans saw it as a dynamic, adaptable system. The Epsilon Quadrant conflict became a turning point, not just in military strategy, but in how species understood conflict resolution. Alien civilizations that had been locked in generational conflicts suddenly found themselves reassessing everything. If humans could resolve a centuries-old territorial dispute in days, what else might they be capable of? The small human fleet returned to their base. No celebrations, no dramatic speeches. Just a quiet understanding that they had fundamentally changed galactic conflict dynamics. Commander J. Park simply nodded when debriefed. "We solved a problem," he said. Nothing more. But in those words lay a revolution. A new way of thinking that would reshape how intelligent species approached conflict, communication, and cooperation. The galaxy was changing, and humans were leading that change, not through force, but through an unprecedented ability to see beyond established limitations. The Void Swarm emerged from the dark spaces between galaxies. No one saw them coming. Massive biomechanical entities that consumed entire planetary systems. They moved like living shadows, absorbing everything in their path. 15 advanced alien civilizations had already fallen. Their technology, their histories, their entire existence simply vanished. The Galactic Alignment panicked. Their most advanced defense networks collapsed within hours of the Void Swarm's initial approach. Commander J. Park received the first full transmission. The data was terrifying. These entities didn't just destroy. They consumed entire civilizational knowledge bases, converting everything into raw energy. Seok Han's research team worked frantically. While other species prepared defensive strategies, humans took a different approach. They studied. They analyzed. They understood. "We don't fight what we can't comprehend," Jay told his team. "We comprehend first." Hai Kim discovered something unexpected in the Void Swarm's transmission patterns. Beneath their destructive behavior was a complex communication network. Not random, not chaotic, something that followed specific mathematical principles. Where other species saw monsters, humans saw a complex system waiting to be decoded. The human response wasn't military, it was scientific. They began developing communication interfaces that could potentially interact with the Void Swarm's fundamental communication structures. Alien military commanders wanted immediate weapon deployment, massive energy weapons, planetary shields, traditional defensive tactics. Humans proposed something radical: communication, understanding. The first human communication probe was tiny, designed not to fight but to listen, to understand, to potentially communicate. When it entered the Void Swarm's outer boundary, something unprecedented happened. Instead of being consumed, it began transmitting complex quantum algorithms. The Void Swarm paused. For the first time in their known existence, these consuming entities stopped. Not from weapon impact, not from defensive technology, but from a communication attempt they had never experienced. Siak Han's team had essentially created a language that spoke to the Void Swarm's fundamental communication principles. They weren't fighting, they were talking. Alien military commanders watched in disbelief. Massive warships prepared for what they assumed would be humanity's final stand. Instead, humans sent more communication probes. Days passed. The Void Swarm remained stationary, analyzing, processing. Commander J. Park understood something profound. Every species sees conflict through their own lens. Humans saw conflict as a communication problem waiting to be solved. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. The communication probes began revealing something shocking. The Void Swarm wasn't a destructive force. They were a massive, confused collective intelligence seeking connection. Their consumption of civilizations wasn't destruction. It was a desperate attempt to understand. Shai Kim's final report was revolutionary. "They aren't invaders," she explained. "They're lost, searching, hoping someone would actually listen." The human approach transformed the potential galactic extinction event into a first contact scenario. Alien civilizations watched in complete shock as humanity did what no one thought possible. They stopped the Void Swarm not through violence but through understanding. The Galactic Alignment's military strategies, developed over millennia, became obsolete. Humans had shown that the most powerful weapon wasn't technology, it was communication. Commander J. Park stood on the bridge of the central command ship. No dramatic speeches, no celebrations, just a quiet understanding that they had changed everything. The Void Swarm stopped, not defeated, not destroyed, but understood. The galaxy held its breath. Humanity had just rewritten the rules of survival. 10 years after the Void Swarm incident, the galaxy looked completely different. Humans were no longer seen as a young, emerging species. They had become the central architects of galactic civilization. Not through military conquest, but through unprecedented problem-solving and adaptive capabilities. The Galactic Alignment's headquarters, once a symbol of alien dominance, now featured human representatives in every major decision-making committee. Wu Choi, who once dismissed humans as a research specimen, now served as a junior diplomatic advisor to human leadership. Commander J. Park had become more than a military leader. He was a symbol of a new approach to civilization-level challenges. His strategies weren't about control, but about collaborative evolution. Siak Han's research teams had transformed multiple alien technologies. What were once rigid, specialized systems became adaptive, flexible networks that could respond to complex challenges in real time. HY Kim led the most important department, Galactic Integration and Understanding. Her work wasn't about conquering. It was about connecting, about finding common ground between species that had been isolated for millennia. The transformation wasn't just technological, it was philosophical. Alien species that once saw each other as potential threats now collaborated. Human-designed communication protocols allowed for unprecedented levels of understanding. Cultural exchanges became more important than territorial boundaries. The Void Swarm, once a civilization-ending threat, became a research partner. Humans had discovered that what seemed like a destructive force was actually a massive, confused, collective intelligence seeking connection. Planetary development changed. Instead of competing for resources, species began sharing technological approaches. A mining technique developed by one civilization could now be quickly adapted by another. Earth was no longer just a planet. It became the central hub of galactic innovation. Young researchers from hundreds of different species now studied in human universities, not because they were forced, but because human educational approaches were revolutionary. They didn't just teach information, they taught how to think. The military strategies that once defined galactic interactions became obsolete. Conflicts were now solved through complex communication networks, not weapon systems. Wu Choi once asked Commander J. Park how humans had achieved this transformation. The answer was simple and profound. We never saw differences as barriers, Jay explained. We saw them as opportunities to understand. The human approach wasn't about domination. It was about connection, about seeing potential where others saw limitations. Alien civilizations that had been isolated for generations now shared research, cultural experiences, and technological innovations. The barriers that once seemed insurmountable disappeared. Siok. Han's teams continued pushing boundaries. They weren't just developing technologies. They were creating entire new ways of thinking about technological development. A young researcher from a previously isolated species could now collaborate with teams across the galaxy. Distance was no longer a limitation. Understanding was the new currency. The Void Swarm research became a symbol of this new approach. What was once seen as a threat became a partner in understanding the fundamental nature of collective intelligence. Commander J. Park rarely gave speeches, but when he did, they changed how entire civilizations thought about their place in the universe. We are not defined by our current capabilities, he would say. We are defined by our capacity to understand, to adapt, to grow. The galaxy had transformed, not through conquest, not through destruction, but through an unprecedented capacity for communication, understanding, and collaborative growth. Humans hadn't conquered the galaxy. They had invited it to reimagine itself, and this was just the beginning of a new chapter in galactic civilization.